Arlett bled out on the filthy alley as her 3 Prylorian attackers jeered. "Just die already, you unclean piece of trash!" one snarled, kicking her broken ribs. The young alien woman gasped in agony. They'd beaten her beyond recognition. Everyone on Score, her home planet, wanted her dead. For an unforgivable transgression she didn't even commit, but she didn't want to die like this. Jake Johnson heard the cruel laughter and sounds of brutality as he unloaded cargo from his freighter. Even after 12 years as a Marine, it made his stomach turn. Gripping his PX-45 blaster, the grizzled human captain charged into the alley. 3 burly Prylorians surrounded a crumpled, bleeding female. Purple blood pooled around her mangled body. "Hey!" Jake roared. "Get the hell away from her!" Startled, the attackers spun. Jake stunned them with 3 quick blasts. They crumpled. The woman peered at Jake through swollen eyes. She looked young, afraid, resigned to her fate. "Please," she croaked, "help me. Everyone else will let me die." Her plea hit Jake like a punch to the gut. He holstered his blaster and scooped her broken body up as gently as he could. She felt light as a child in his battle-hardened arms. He had to get her to his medbay, fast, or this poor girl would die on a planet that wanted her dead for a crime she clearly didn't commit. Jake didn't know what he was getting into, but he did know one thing. He couldn't let her die, not like this, not while he still had a breath in his body. Jaw clenched, Jake carried Arlett towards his ship. Her life depended on him. He just prayed he wasn't too late. Jake carried Arlett's broken body into the medbay, his heart pounding. He laid her on the exam table as gently as he could. "Doc, I need you," he called out, his voice tight. The medical AI whirred to life, extending its scanners and surgical arms. "I detect multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and a severe concussion," Doc reported clinically. "Beginning emergency stabilization." As Doc worked to knit Arlett's shattered bones and repair her ruptured organs, Jake paced the medbay, his fists clenched. Who could do this to another sentient being? Beat them within an inch of their life and leave them to die in agony? It made him sick. Needing answers, Jake pulled up the ship's console and searched the net for information on Prylorian culture. What he found made his blood boil. Prylorians followed a brutal caste system based entirely on skin color. The lighter your skin, the higher your status. The darker your hue, the more you were treated like garbage. Arlett's deep indigo skin marked her as one of the lowest unclean castes. To the upper echelons, she was considered subhuman, unworthy of basic rights or dignity. The cultural database detailed the systemic abuse, discrimination and violence inflicted on low-caste Prylorians, things like being barred from certain jobs and schools, targeted harassment and assaults, even killings, which high castes could commit against low castes without legal repercussions. "Those bastards tried to murder her for having the wrong skin color," Jake snarled, slamming his fist on the console, "for being inferior in their twisted worldview." Once Doc reported that Arlett was out of immediate danger, Jake contacted Prylorian law enforcement to report the attack, but the officer on the line just scoffed. "An attempted culling of unclean filth? Not our problem, off-worlder. Be glad it's still alive." Jake saw red. He ended the call and grabbed his PX-45 blaster, some zip ties and a few other choice items. Checking that Arlett was stable and resting, he strode off his ship, his jaw set. If Prylorian law wouldn't punish Arlett's attackers, Jake would. He'd hunt down those 3 racist thugs and teach them what happened when you brutalized an innocent being. A lesson they wouldn't soon forget, delivered with his fists and righteous fury. The neon sign of the rusty airlock bar flickered in the grimy spaceport district. Jake stepped inside the dimly lit dive, his hand resting on his blaster. His eyes scanned the room, locking onto his targets, the 3 high-caste Prylorians who had brutalized Arlett. They lounged in a booth, laughing and downing shots of glowing blue liquor. Jake strode over, his jaw clenched. "You pieces of shit nearly killed an innocent girl today." The biggest male, with pale lavender skin, sneered up at him. "You mean that worthless dark skin? Who cares? It's not like culling unclean filth is a crime." Jake saw red. He grabbed the Prylorian by the collar and slammed his head into the table. Bone crunched. The others leapt up, but Jake was faster. He laid into them with a flurry of punches, his marine training making each blow brutally effective. In seconds, the three attackers lay groaning on the floor, their faces bloody and bones shattered. Jake stood over them, breathing hard. He ground his boot into the lavender one's chest until he whimpered. "If any of you ever touch Arlet again, I'll fucking kill you," Jake growled. "That's a promise." Leaving the Prylorians bleeding and moaning, Jake stalked out of the bar. He knew word would spread quickly through the spaceport, but he didn't care. He'd sent a clear message. Arlet was under his protection now. Back at the ship, Jake was checking on a still unconscious Arlet in the medbay when proximity alarms blared. He pulled up the external cameras and cursed. A group of 24 high-caste Prylorians, armed and grim-faced, stood outside his ship. At their head was an older male with regal bearing and ice-blue skin. Jake strapped on his pistol and opened the hatch. He stepped out to face the mob, his expression hard. "What do you want?" The blue-skinned leader glared at him coldly. "I am Councillor Zathrak Morovin, head of the Purity Defense Council, and father of the unclean filth you have on your ship." Jake crossed his arms. "You mean your daughter who your people nearly beat to death, the innocent girl I saved?" Zathrak curled his lip in disgust. "Innocent? That genetic inferior is a stain on our pure society. Her kind are a plague that will destroy Prylorian civilization if not eliminated. You will hand her over to us for execution. Then you will leave our planet immediately, human." "Like hell I will," Jake snarled. "I won't let you murder her for the crime of being born with the wrong skin color." The counselor narrowed his eyes. "You dare defy me, alien, I'll have you arrested." Jake dropped his hand to his blaster. "Just try it. I faced worse than you." Suddenly a deep voice boomed out. "That's far enough, boys." Jake turned to see a dozen heavily armed humans in battle armor marching up, pulse rifles leveled at the Prylorians. Their leader, a massive bear of a man, flashed Jake a grin. "Mick, what are you doing here?" Mick Reeves, Jake's old war buddy, clapped him on the shoulder. "You sent a distress call, dumbass. Said some racist fucks were after your passenger. Thought you could use some backup." Jake exhaled in relief, then turned back to Zathrak. The counselor eyed the human mercenaries and their very big guns. He took a step back. "This isn't over," Zathrak hissed. "That wretched girl's mere existence threatens our way of life. We will not allow her or any unclean to taint our purity. There will be consequences for your interference, human." With that, the Prylorians turned and marched off, shooting venomous glares over their shoulders. Jake watched them go, his gut tight. He knew this was far from finished. But with Mick and his mercs here, at least Arlet was safe for now. And Jake swore he'd do whatever it took to keep her that way, no matter what. Jake and Mick sat in the ship's lounge, bottles of cold beer in hand. The adrenaline from the confrontation with the Prylorians still pumped through Jake's veins. He took a long pull from his drink, savoring the bitter taste. "Thanks for the backup, man. Wasn't sure how that standoff was going to go." Mick waved a dismissive hand. "Forget it. You'd have done the same for me. Besides, I've got a personal stake in this now." Jake raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Mick leaned forward, his expression serious. "I've been working with a group called the Prylorian Underground Railroad. They smuggle low-caste Prylorians off-world, get them to safety away from all this racist bullshit." Jake whistled low. "Damn, that's heavy stuff." "It's necessary. You've seen firsthand how bad it is for people like Arlet. Per wants you to join up, help ferry refugees out on your freighter." Jake hesitated. Smuggling refugees under the noses of the Prylorian authorities was risky as hell. It would paint a huge target on his back. But then he thought of Arlet, broken and bleeding in that alley. The casual cruelty and indifference of her attackers and the cops. The hate in her father's eyes. Others. His jaw tightened. "I'm in. Let's do this." Mick grinned and clapped him on the shoulder. "Knew you'd say that. I've got a group of unclean ready to go. We'll stash them in your hidden cargo holds and head for a secret colony called Haven out on the edge of human space. Jake drained his beer, his resolve hardening. Let's get to it. In the medbay, Arlette jolted awake with a gasp. She thrashed in panic, disoriented. Where was she? Had the mob come to finish her off? Hey, easy. A deep, gentle voice cut through her fear. A human man with kind eyes appeared in her blurry vision. You're safe. I'm Jake. I brought you to my ship after those bastards attacked you. Arlette stared at him, uncomprehending. A human had saved her, but why? Her kind were the lowest of the low. Realization crashed over her. Shame burned her cheeks as she recalled her brutal beating, the cruel words and laughter, the sickening crack of her bones snapping. A sob tore from her throat. She curled into a ball, heedless of the pain, as the dam burst. Great, racking sobs shook her body. They were going to kill me, beat me to death in the street like an animal, because I'm unclean, tainted. The words poured out of her in a rush. All my life I've been treated like garbage, kicked, spit on, told I'm nothing. I've been beaten, raped, tortured, all because my skin is the wrong color. Jake listened in growing horror and rage. Nausea churned in his gut. He reached out and gently took her hand, mindful of her injuries. Arlette, look at me. She raised her tear-streaked face. What they did to you is unspeakable, but it's not your fault. There is nothing wrong with you. You didn't deserve any of that. No one does. He squeezed her hand. I swear to you, I won't let them hurt you again. I'll protect you. You're safe now. Fresh tears spilled down Arlette's cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. She managed a wavering smile. Thank you, Jake, for saving me, for being kind. No one has ever shown me kindness before. As they talked, Arlette shared her dreams of a better future. I'm a xenobiologist, she said shyly. I want to find a cure for the genetic mutation that causes our skin colors. End the discrimination once and for all. Prove we're all equal. Jake felt a swell of admiration. This incredible woman had suffered so much. But instead of giving in to hate, she wanted to create change, fix what was broken. You are amazing, he told her sincerely. Don't let anyone tell you different. We'll find a way to make your dream a reality. Arlette's smile was like the sun coming out. For the first time in her life, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this human really could help her change things. Their tender moment shattered as alarms started blaring. Jake leapt to his feet and pulled up a console. His blood ran cold. A massive Prilorian warship hung in space before them, weapons charged and locked on. Human vessel, this is Commander Zoran Kaz of the Prilorian Navy. A harsh voice crackled over the comms. You are harboring a fugitive unclean. Surrender her to us immediately or be destroyed. Jake's mind raced. His small freighter was no match for a warship's firepower, but he'd be damned if he'd hand Arlette over to those murderous pricks. Mick, he barked into his comms, change of plans, get those refugees to Haven now, I'll deal with our friends out there. What? Jake, don't be stupid, you can't fight them alone. Just go, Jake roared. I'll keep them busy, don't let those innocent people die. He cut the comm over Mick's furious protests and turned to Arlette. She stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. Jake, don't do this, they'll kill you. He touched her cheek gently. Better me than you and those refugees. You deserve a chance at a real life. I won't let them take that. Ignoring her desperate pleas, Jake charged toward the bridge, praying Mick could get away in time. He had no illusions he'd survive this. One freighter against a warship? Suicide. But if his life was the price to keep Arlette and the others safe, to give them a shot at freedom and a future, he'd pay it gladly. Jake fired up the weapons and turned to face the looming warship, his heart pounding but his will resolved. Come and get me, you bastards. Jake's hands flew over the controls as he plunged the freighter into the dense asteroid field. The Prilorian warship pursued, its weapons pounding against his shields. Jake wove and dodged between the massive rocks, barely avoiding collision. Arlette gripped her seat, eyes wide with fear. Jake, this is insane. We'll never make it through. "We have to try," Jake gritted out, sweat beading on his brow. "I'm not letting those bastards get their hands on you." The ship shuddered as a chunk of asteroid slammed into the hull. Alarms blared. Jake cursed, fighting to keep them steady. The warship stayed right on their tail, relentless. Suddenly, a searing blast rocked the freighter. The lights flickered and died. Jake's stomach dropped as he saw the readouts. "They hit our engines! We're losing power!" Ahead loomed an enormous asteroid, dwarfing the others. With sickening certainty, Jake knew they were going to crash right into it. There was no way to avoid it, not with their engines gone. In that instant, Jake made his choice. He unbuckled and grabbed Arlett's hand, pulling her out of her seat. "Come on! We have to move!" "What are you doing?" Arlett cried as he dragged her aft. Jake didn't answer. He punched the code to the escape pod and shoved Arlett inside. Her eyes went wide with understanding and horror. "No, Jake, no, I won't leave you." "You have to." Jake cupped her face, memorizing every detail. "Arlett, listen to me. You're going to change the world. Don't ever stop fighting for what's right. Promise me." Tears streamed down her cheeks as the pod sealed shut. "I promise." Jake slammed his hand on the launch control. The pod blasted away, carrying Arlett to safety. He sagged against the wall, watching until it disappeared from view. "Goodbye," he whispered. A strange calm settled over him. He'd done it. She was safe. That was all that mattered. The ship bucked and heaved as it hurtled toward the asteroid. Jake closed his eyes. In his final moments he saw Arlett's face, alight with hope and determination. A smile touched his lips. Impact. Everything went white. Arlett screamed as she watched Jake's freighter smash into the asteroid. The explosion lit up the void, debris flying in all directions. Denial warred with despair as she searched for any sign he'd escaped. But there was nothing, just an expanding field of wreckage. Jake was gone. The man who saved her, protected her, believed in her, sacrificed everything for her, gone in a blink. Arlett crumpled, sobs racking her body. The pain was unlike anything she'd ever known. But even as grief threatened to swallow her whole, Arlett clung to her promise. She wouldn't let Jake's death be in vain. She'd keep fighting no matter what, for him, for her people, for the future he died to give her. When Mick found her pod drifting amidst the asteroids, Arlett emerged hardened, tempered by sorrow and purpose. She looked out at the other wide-eyed refugees, so desperate for hope. "Jake Johnson saved us," she told them, voice ringing with conviction. "A human laid down his life so we could have a chance. We can't let his sacrifice be for nothing. It's time to take back our destiny from those who would grind us down. It's time to rise up and shatter the chains. Who's with me? Who's—" A ragged cheer went up. In that moment a new chapter began. The resistance had its spark. The caste system's days were numbered. As years passed, Arlett grew into a leader forged in the crucible of hardship and loss. She wielded her brilliant mind like a scalpel, devising daring raids and clever propaganda to undermine the regime. Supporters flocked to her banner, drawn by her passion and vision of a free Pryloria. "They can beat us, but they can never break us," Arlett cried to the cheering crowds. "We are all Prylorians, and we will take back what's ours. Brick by brick, we'll tear down the walls that divide us until all stand equal under the sun." Her words ignited the downtrodden, rallied the weary. And always in her heart, Arlett carried the memory of the man who started it all, her inspiration, her guiding light. Jake was gone, but his dream lived on. In every rebel who took up arms, every low caste who dared to hold their head high, every victory against the odds. There Jake's legacy endured. The spark he lit grew into a raging inferno, burning away centuries of cruelty and injustice. And one day, when the last bastion of the old ways crumbled and Prylorians of every color clasped hands, as true equals, Arlett knew Jake would be smiling down on them. The future he gave everything for had finally dawned, bright and full of promise. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.